Good morning, people. How are we? It's Wednesday morning and it is time for a push. So we're going to get started. We are on page 9 and we kind of ended in a spot where I got into something and I went too far. And so anyway, let me fix this again. I don't like this angle. All right, here we go. We were on page 9 talking about the bank, and the Bank of the United States, or the bus, is one of the things that Andrew Jackson sees as kind of this icon that represents all the things that he's battled against: New Englanders, merchants, wealth, the power that the bankers have over the common man. And so he has kind of set this bank up as this kind of knight slaying a dragon thing. That's the thing that he's going to do, is make sure that this dragon or Hydra or Bank of US that is devouring the West and farmers and being unfair, he's going to defeat it. And that's where we stopped kind of yesterday with the bank. It's trying to kill me, or I'm going to kill it. And that's what he sets out to do. He sets out to destroy the Bank of the United States, not thinking about the financial impact that that's going to have. So the scheme that he uses to take down the banks will be called pet banks. So here's where we start. Jackson's going to veto the charter. He's going to say, nope, not going to do it. It's monopolistic. It's unconstitutional. Nicholas Biddle, and again, that name is underlined because, and I just want to make clear really quick, an asterisk. When I have stuff underlined and bolded, that means somewhere in the last, how long have I taught Apush? 15 years, that name has appeared on the College Board exam. I think I've mentioned that before, but I'm not sure. So when you see things that are underlined or bold, other than when we talk about big, giant, significant things, but just that sporadic, that means Nicholas Biddle's name has appeared somewhere on the AP exam. I try to go through my notes like every 2 or 3 years to change that and make changes. So Nicholas Biddle has shown up. I don't know when, but he was there. This, again, the bank favored the elite. And even though Andrew Jackson really was an elite, my hair again. Okay, stop messing with my hair. He favored the elite, was forcing foreclosures on farms in the West, all these things that makes now the bank and Nicholas Biddle Jackson's foes. So Jackson acted as if the president was superior to the judicial branch, because remember, in McCullough versus Maryland, the Supreme Court said the bank was constitutional and set it to go and left it alone. Jackson's now saying, I'm going against the Supreme Court and the Constitution in trying to get rid of this bank. So before, and we haven't really talked about what the bank does or what it is or why it's important. We just keep saying it's there. So on page 9, number 4, you need to make sure that you've got a strong list of why that bank is important. The bank shrinks before it's killed, and he's going to kill it. He is going to be successful in killing it. It is a sound organization. And when we talk financially about something being sound, that means it has good economic practices. It's making money. It's being, it's taking depositors' money in good faith, and its balance sheets are balanced and good. So it's a sound organization. There's nothing financially or economically wrong with the bank. It reduces bank failures instead of what Andrew Jackson is saying, because the Bank of the U.S. has those deposits of other banks, it keeps them safe. Issued sound banknotes. And remember, still, we're at this really weird, funny thing with money, that the United States doesn't really have a monetary system yet. So every bank is issuing a banknote. And what that means is I go into a bank and I deposit money. And let's say I deposit $500 in a bank account. I would get a bank note that said on the note that this depositor has this much money guaranteed in this bank. And that's what I would present as my currency, and then they would in turn present that to the bank, and the bank would give it to them. Money really isn't exchanging hands like that, because I know it's weird. It makes my mind hurt to think about it too, but hopefully in about 20 years, by the end of December, we'll be at real money in this class. Spurred economic expansion. Spurred means bring on. So it was helping economic expansion. And most importantly is E. It was a safe depository for federal government funds. So all that money that the federal government collects on tariffs and everything else they collect, it has to go somewhere. Like, it doesn't just sit in a pile at the back of the halls of Congress. It has to go somewhere. And so it was going into the Bank of the United States. And again, establishing this strong, reliable bank and banking system that the United States based its economic practices on. And Andrew Jackson, for many of those reasons I said before, hates the bank. So he comes up with a scheme. How can I crush this bank? And he comes up with what will be known as, on the bottom of page 9, the pet bank scheme. Now, pet banks, think about teacher's pet. It's the same kind of thing, that a teacher supposedly, would never be me because I like all of my students, has favorite students that they like. Andrew Jackson's going to do the same thing with banks. He's going to pick certain banks that he likes, most of them all located in, guess where? The West. And he's going to start removing 4E, the deposits of the federal government, from the Bank of the United States. So he transferred federal deposits from the bank to 23 state banks. He's just going to put he's taking out that money and putting them in banks. The Secretary of Treasury, Roger Taney, who is, we will see him again in a really bad way. He's going to be Chief Justice. Biddle is going to retaliate. Biddle says, okay, you're going to take my money out. I will call and raise you this. He starts calling in loans with unnecessarily severity for the purpose of forcing a reconsideration. So what that means, and I'm sure, even though it doesn't list it, the loans that he calls in are probably people somehow connected to Jackson himself. And what that means, and you should know this, if you take out a loan, any of you that you or your parents took out a loan, like to purchase your car, and maybe your parents make you pay the loan note, banks at any time can say, hey, we want you to pay that whole loan now. It doesn't happen very often, but they can. And that's what Biddle said. You know that loan that we said you could pay for 10 years? Nope, we don't want you to pay it 10 years. We want it now. We're going to take our money back now. And most people have a loan because they don't have that kind of money. So it will be difficult. Now, some of the places that have the loans are actually banks themselves. And so he calls those banks and says, hey, you got to pay in your loans. And the banks can't. The banks then have to look for those people to get their loans. And it is destroying the economy, destroying. So Biddle retaliated by calling in loans. Some weak banks were casualties. Actions reaffirmed the bank as a dying monster. Again, this is something that many of Jackson's supporters and the common man and the people in the West see as a good, positive thing. At the bottom of page 9, public lands now had to be purchased with hard money. In other words, you had to have gold coins, which most people did not carry around, and it makes it really difficult. At the bottom of page 9, in 1836, wildcat currency had become unreliable. So those banknotes no longer had any weight behind them because these banks were going under, and it is a bad situation. So at the top of page 10, Jackson authorized the Treasury to issue a species circular. All public lands had to be purchased with federal money. Hard money brought hard times to the West. That is something that you need to remember because, as I said on the other page, we are at a funky, weird place with money. We don't really have a monetary system throughout the whole states. Got these crazy banknotes. So every time you see something about species circular, or because we're going to talk about it a lot, and again, until after the Civil War, we don't get this thing figured out. And anytime that happens, and that's why I have that hard money brought hard times, whenever we talk about somebody having to have hard currency, the common man and poor people are going to have a difficult time with that. We don't have access to gold bars like wealthy people do. And that's what this is. It's you got to have gold. And again, it will be difficult. And inflation is going to go through the roof. Inflation means your wages stay flat, but prices go up. And so you can't afford the things that you normally do. Gas is a really good one to explain that to with students. For all of you that work, if your paycheck reflected the cost of gas, so in essence, if at Joe's Pizza on your paycheck day, your boss said, the price of gas went up 10 cents this week. I'm going to increase your salary by 10 cents this week. You wouldn't care about the cost of gas because your salary goes up with the cost of living. That's called a cost of living raise. Most employers don't give that because it's hard. But if your wages stay flat and the gas prices go up to a certain amount, that's inflation. And it's difficult. It is a really difficult economic problem. So that's what's happening with the bank. We're going to leave the bank there for a second, throw in a couple of more court cases. And these court cases will be important in that they're leading again. Remember, almost all of our judges on the federal bench are Federalist. And so they're always going to side on the case or on the side of these cases on the side of business. So general incorporation laws. Traditionally, corporation charters granted by states were seen as monopoly-oriented. States began to make incorporation easier, thus spurring the United States economy with small and medium-sized businesses. And then what will happen is we'll get this limited liability, or LLC. And that means that if you start a business, your business transactions and your business money is separate from your personal income, which makes owning a business much easier. Your home and all that isn't tied up with that. So reduce the risk of owning a business. Charles River Bridge decision. Again, this is about bridge builders and charters. And again, in the end, it's not really about bridges or any of things. Please look at C5. Encourage economic development in transportation and other public facilities via competition. What Charles River Bridge decision says is you can't have a monopoly on water. Everybody has a right to move on the water, and that will spur all of this transportation. Because remember, we're still traveling majority by water. And I got to take a pause. I'm talking really fast, and I'm trying to get this done so I can get in. And then last one on the bottom, page 10. Jackson favored states' rights again. And he's going to refuse to spend federal money for internal improvements, roads and canals. He doesn't want any federal money to be spent on that. States should be doing that themselves. And again, he's going to veto anything that comes up about that. It's not really going to make a difference in the North and in the West. It's going to make a huge difference in the South because the South is not going to spend any of their money on roads, canals, bridges, railroads. And when we hit 1860, it's going to be really hard to move troops without roads, bridges, railroads, and good transportation systems. So it will really hurt the South in this whole states' rights thing that they're doing. All right, now we're really going to switch gears as we move to the top of page 11 and talk about probably what Andrew Jackson is most noted for, and it is the removal of Native Americans, the Trail of Tears. Andrew Jackson has a long history as an Indian fighter. That's how he makes his name with the fighting of Indians in Florida, the Seminole Wars. Very brutal, and he continues that movement. So, 1830, most territories east of the Mississippi had become states, and most American Indian tribes were surrounded by white settlements. So, one of the things to think about is any of the tribes on that are on the east coast, east of the Mississippi River, at this point, living somewhat in peace and harmony. We're not having Indian wars. The Seminoles down in Florida, a little bit different. But most all the ones that are states, because Florida's not a state yet, but most states have Indian tribes. They live peacefully, kind of sort of coexist. They certainly aren't fighting, right? There's no Indian wars. But here's the issue, and this will be something that we'll discuss throughout the history of the United States. We cannot get this Indian thing right, and we try and struggle, and we can't. Jackson did not regard the tribes as separate nations within individual states. So that begins the first problem, and we'll use this word sovereignty, right? Who is sovereign? The Indian tribes say they're sovereign within, like, this is our territory. You can't tell us what to do, even though we're inside the state of Georgia. And Jackson said, no, you're wrong. So he starts to want to take control of these Indian situations. So the Indian Removal Act is this idea of bodily removing. That means we're going in, we're picking your body up, and we're moving you. And this is the 5 civilized tribes. And they're called the 5 civilized tribes because that's what they did. At a certain point, the Cherokee, the Cree, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminole all said, these white people are here to stay. We have to coexist. Let's try. And these civilized tribes work towards creating a civilization that they can kind of fit in. You know, they start their own schools, they have a newspaper, they start to record their own language, trying to kind of look as most white as they can while retaining their native ways. Well, individual Indians might remain if they adopted white ways, but most of them already had. There are about 100,000 Indians that will be forcibly uprooted and moved. And we will begin this Bureau of Indian Affairs in 1836. We still have the BIA. It controls and in charge of all the reservations across the United States and money and all that. And we'll continue to discuss the Bureau of Indian Affairs. But here's what happens with Cherokee. This is where it starts. So Cherokee, again, as I already stated, they have certain aspects. They have a language, they have a newspaper, they have a constitution, they have an agricultural base, and they try to assimilate. And that, again, is always going to be the problem with assimilation and looking different. And that's not going to happen. So here's what happens. And all of this really is important as we look at A2. This is what necessitates the Indians being moved. And the Indians being moved is because 2A, gold is discovered where they're at. So the history of United States Indian relations might be so different if gold had not been found there. But because gold is found there, it's different. All right, I'm going to pause here for a second. For those of you that are listening at this moment, this is your opportunity for a little bit of bonus. So here's what I'm going to do. At this point, I am going to offer, let me think how much I'm going to give. I'm going to say 75 points. I'm going to give 75 bonus points. I have 75 to award, and I'm going to split it up between all the people that are going to answer the question that I am going to have up at the top of the screen at 18 minutes is when I'll put it up. And you answer that question, you email me that question, and you and whomever else answers that question correctly gets to share those bonus points. So it's in your best interest not to tell anybody about this at all, because if you're the only one watching in 18 minutes, you get all the bonus points. You do have to answer this by, let me pick a time. I'm going to say by 6 o'clock. That allows Wyatt to get up at 4 and make his way over. 6 o'clock. If you answer by 6 o'clock, you and whoever else answers the bonus question will share 75 points. And if it's only one person, wow, that's pretty awesome. All right, so let's get back. The bonus question will be up there somewhere. I got to think of what it is, but I'll put it at 18 minutes. All right, so gold is there. And they start pushing the Cherokee out. We get Cherokee Nation versus Georgia. So the Cherokee Nation sues the state of Georgia. Like, no, we're not part of the United States. We are the Cherokee Nation. We're not the United States. Cherokee challenged a Georgia law that made Cherokee laws null and void, and there's that nullification. And the Supreme Court said Cherokee lacked jurisdiction. It was a domestic, dependent nation possessing some sovereignty, but it was not a foreign nation. So Cherokee said, rats. Turn the page. They then go back to Worcester versus Georgia. And in Worcester versus Georgia, and that's the worksheet that you're reading, John Marshall ruled that Georgia's laws had no jurisdiction inside Cherokee territory, and Cherokee territory could invite whomever they wished on its land. So John Marshall's court said Cherokee Nation is sovereign, and they don't have to follow Georgia's rules. Samuel Worcester was a missionary living with the Cherokee, forced by Georgia to take an oath of allegiance or leave, and he refused. Jackson, and this is really important, said John Marshall made his decision, let him enforce it. Andrew Jackson, President of the United States, directly threatens the Supreme Court that I am going to pay no attention to your court ruling, and I'm going to do whatever I want. And if you want to stop me, come at me, stop me. And he definitely disregards the power of the Supreme Court. Jackson did nothing to enforce the decision, and the Cherokee realized their fate when Jackson flouted the Supreme Court. I use that word flouted mostly because that was one of my granny's favorite words, flouting off. It was something like a temper tantrum, like, I see you and I'm not going to do that. So we get this horrific movement of Indians away from their native lands forcibly, called the Trail of Tears. In 1838, 18,000 Cherokee forcibly removed. And in that 18,000, grandmas, grandpas, babies, elderly, sick, dying people moved from their homes and marched 1,000 miles, marched on their 2 feet, 1,000 miles to now what will be Indian Territory in Oklahoma. I'm going to put a spoiler alert. In about 100 years, no, not 100 years, in about 90 years, we're going to find oil there, and we're going to move the Indians again from that place that we moved them to start with. 4,000 people are going to die on this trek because of malnutrition. They didn't get enough food, exposure, cholera, and harsh treatment. Soldiers forced the march with rifles and bayonets. It is one of the darkest days in Indian relations in the United States history. 25% of Choctaws will die, and 3,500 of the Creeks will die during their removal. So all of them will be removed. We're going to tie up this last little look at Indians on the other side. So now we're on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains. We've got a Black Hawk War, and if you've ever wondered why Chicago are called the Black Hawks, because this is where this battle takes place. Black Hawk War, Braves in Illinois and Wisconsin led by Black Hawks resisted removal on lands west of Lake Huron. We're going to meet in a couple of chapters a really important person that fought in that Black Hawk War, and that would be a guy named Abraham Lincoln, who eloquently said he got more mosquito bites than he did anything else in the war. So the area west of Lake Michigan becomes open, so now we push into that way. And then again, the Seminoles in Florida will be ordered to merge with their old enemy, the Creek, and relocate. And they're going to refuse. E2, bloody guerrilla battle in the Second Seminole War that left 1,500 U.S. soldiers war. It is the bloodiest it's at the end of my time. I'm getting a little crazy. Bloodiest Native American conflict in U.S. history. That is why that's bulleted, because that Second Seminole War does pop up again sometimes as a conflict. 4/5 or 3,000 were first forcibly moved to Oklahoma, where only about 3,000 survive today. So all of those moving into Oklahoma. The reason they were moved into Oklahoma was because Oklahoma was thought to be a tract of land that was invaluable, right? It was deserty, didn't look like any good agricultural land, certainly didn't know there was going to be oil there that we were going to find and then have to do something again with Indians. So, all right, so that ends our lecture for today. Oh, I only talked 25 minutes today. That's pretty good. Tomorrow, we have the rest of our notes and the chapter 13 reading quiz. So make sure you're prepared for that. I don't know, did I have an SAQ quiz? I do have one, but I don't know that we're going to have time for that because we still have to do the birth of Texas and get into Van Buren before we take the quiz. So the SAQ quiz will probably be on Monday. We'll do that on Monday instead. So please make sure you're working on your assignments. They're all due this Friday, and have a great Wednesday. It's back to kind of chilly. I think it's only supposed to be 50 degrees today. So have a great Wednesday. Do all your assignments. Check into Canvas, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Oh, it takes me forever to find this stop button. Okay, now really, bye.